You know, there were a lot of parts about last year's team that had Kirby Smart ripping his hair out, but this one aspect of the 2024 Georgia Bulldogs had him going crazy week after week after week. And it was Georgia's inability to not only score points, but move the football in the first half of games. It was tough to watch. This is probably the worst first half Georgia team, especially on offense, that I have seen in a long, long time. And unfortunately, I've got the numbers to back it up. So we're going to talk about why and how Georgia was so bad offensively in the first half and in the first quarter of some of these games. And we saw it, to really kick off the season against Clemson. Their first points came on their third drive of the game with a field goal. They had one more second quarter field goal that gave them just 6 points total in the first half on 4 drives. Not great. I believe they were up 6-0. And at that point, you're thinking, okay, kind of season opening jitters, trying to build that chemistry and that connection. Okay, 2 first half field goals against a quality Clemson defense. Okay, we'll take that. Because then they come out in the second half and they score 28 points. So Georgia fans are thinking, okay, that's what they do, right? They steamroll teams in the second half. This is a really, really good football team. And they were. But at that time, there were no real red flags going on, especially with the offense, even though it was a tough first half, which would be a theme throughout the season. 2 weeks later, they go up to Lexington, and Georgia fans are excited, right? They just scored 28 points in the second half against Clemson. Kentucky is coming off a game where they just got walloped by South Carolina. I mean, that was ugly, ugly. So Georgia fans are feeling pretty good about going up to Lexington. And their first points didn't come in that game until their 5th drive. Another just really bad offensive performance throughout the game, really. But again, in that first half, too. So the 2 real opponents that you started the season off with, you really struggled in that first half. 3 points on 5 first half drives. Not going to cut it. Not going to cut it. 10 points in the second half. Their first touchdown came late in the third quarter. And we're going to talk about why in just a second, because everyone wants to talk about Mike Bobo, and he absolutely deserves a decent amount of blame. Not 100%, because a lot of this is on the players. But when it's week after week after week, and you're struggling to move the ball, especially when you draw these plays up in practice, and the players can't execute it week after week, and you've got to make all these second half adjustments to get back and climb your way into the game, yeah, a lot of that's on coaching. Why are they not coming out and executing these first, 7 to 10 plays? Why is it not working? What's going on? And some of it is the players and execution. But at the end of the day, when it started to become a theme, you had to look at coaching and say, where are the adjustments? What's going on? Why are things not easier and cleaner and more efficient to start the games? Why is it, just going into the second half? And as I bring that up, we talk about the Alabama game. They had a touchdown. Their first points didn't come until their 4th drive of the game, which was in the second quarter. They went punt, interception, punt, and they're down 28-0. Then they scored 28 second half points, but at the end of the day, they lost that game because they went down 28-0. Yes, I know they took the lead, and you've got to give Mike Bobo credit for taking the lead. You got to give Carson Beck credit, Dylan Bell. Criticize them all you want when they're not playing well, right? Because they deserve criticism when things aren't going well. But you have to give them credit too. And I give them a lot of credit for fighting their way back into that game. But they couldn't hold the lead because they were down 28-0. And they finally took the lead. But, you can't hold the lead when you barely took it, right? It's hard to do that. And again, they lost that because they came out completely flat. And again, didn't score their first points until their 4th drive of the game. Another incredibly slow start that they really couldn't overcome. Now, the next week against Auburn, it was a little better. They scored a touchdown on their first drive, and then they went punt, touchdown before the half. So they have 2 touchdowns on 4 first half drives. Not bad, but Auburn stinks. Auburn stinks. So you can't really say, that was great. That was great. You didn't do it against a quality opponent, right? So hard to celebrate that against Auburn, but finally they're showing some life, and they showed life on their first drive of the game, which is something that at that point in the season you're thinking, okay, 5 games into this, things are coming around a little bit, but they didn't. Auburn was just bad. And, Georgia went on to have one of their better offensive performances of the season. One of, not the best, probably not the second best, maybe the third. But they got it together in that second half. They scored a couple more touchdowns, I believe. They ended up, they scored 17 more points, I guess. They ended up scoring 31 points, I believe. Anyway, moving right along. Then they got Mississippi State. And this was one of their best offensive performances. I think you'd have to throw the Tech game in there. I'll talk about that in a second. But Mississippi State too, but you got to remember, first drive of the game, Carson Beck gets a tipped pass that, is picked off. So they start the game with the ball, and they turn it over. So again, more first drive struggles, more first quarter struggles. But then they got it together. They went field goal, touchdown, field goal, touchdown, touchdown. 27 total first half points. Mississippi State's bad too. They're bad too. So congrats, but it's Mississippi State and Auburn. Mississippi State gave up 30, 40 points to just about everyone but Ole Miss. So cool, but not impressive. That's what you should be doing. You're a top 5 team. You're a team that should be competing for a national championship, and you finally score 20 plus points in the first half. Took them forever, but at that point, you're thinking, hey, maybe now the offense is coming around a little bit. Next week, they go to Austin. First 3 drives went punt, interception, interception. You think, okay, here come the turnovers. Because I think Carson threw 2 against Mississippi State. One of them later in the game was bad. Then they go to Texas, and again, a really tough start to start the game. Tough first quarter, but then they went touchdown, field goal, punt, field goal. 9 total first half drives. That's telling you the defense is going 3 and out, 3 and out, 3 and out. That defense was unreal in that game, and that allowed Georgia to get 9 drives offensively in the first half. So they got a 23-0 halftime lead, but it wasn't great to start the game. They got it together and started figuring things out in that second quarter. But again, really tough start to the game, something that we saw week after week after week. And Kirby's trying to figure this out. Right, every first quarter, it seemed like every first half offensively, things weren't going great. He had to be pulling his hair out. There's a lot of things I think irked him and drove him crazy. But again, their inability to even move the ball a little bit in the first half in a lot of these games had to drive them all nuts all year long. And that's definitely something they have got to fix some way, somehow. Better coaching, better players, better execution. It all has to come to fruition, because this cannot happen again next year. And they've got to learn from it. They've got to figure it out. You cannot have these slow starts. Florida, punt, field goal, interception, interception, punt, field goal. 6 points on 7 drives against the Gators. Not going to cut it. Not going to cut it. They scored 28 points in the second half. So again, they turned it on when they needed to later in the game. But all season long, we did not see them put 4 quarters of strong, efficient offensive football together all year long. That was really, really bad offense in the first half of that Florida game with, again, multiple interceptions. So, yeah, just 6 points on 7 drives. They came together, but at that point, Florida was no good. People threw them away. They were no good, and they really got it together after that Georgia game. But still, against Ole Miss, you know what happened there. They got that early touchdown thanks to the early interception. They did score a touchdown. They're up 7-0, but then they went punt in the first half. We don't have to talk about the second half. It wasn't any better. But just it couldn't move the football. And going into the half, you're thinking, they're in trouble. They're in trouble if they don't really get it together, start winning the line of scrimmage. They didn't. They lost. Against Tennessee, they started the game, punt. Got it together, though. Touchdown, field goal, 17-17 at the half. But again, that first quarter, not great. Punting the ball. Something's not working that they practiced during the week. They're coming out with plays that they think are going to work. They're not working, and it takes them 2 to 3 drives after that to really get it together. They would go on to kind of crush Tennessee in the second half, I guess score 14, 17 more points in that game, and the defense really shut them down. Against Georgia Tech, 0 points in the first half. They went punt, turnover on downs, punt, fumble, missed field goal. They didn't score until the third quarter against Georgia Tech. The offense went off in the second half in overtime, but again, they're going in the half with 0 points on the board. It is unheard of, really, especially with what we've seen out of this team, this program, the past several years, but it's unacceptable. You can't do it. And again, week after week after week with this team, that's what we saw, their inability to get anything together offensively really put them in a bind and put a lot of pressure on the defense in the second half. Against Texas, part 2 in Atlanta, wasn't great. Punt, field goal, punt, fumble. 5 drives, 3 points in the first half. Of course, Gunnar Stockton comes in and saves them, but it was ugly. More ugly offensive football in the first half. They found a way to win the game because they have heart and fight and passion and grit. That's what kind of drove this team, because they were just up and down, too inconsistent, especially on offense all season long. And then in the Sugar Bowl, to start the game, punt, fumble, field goal, punt, fumble. 3 points, 2 turnovers on 6 drives in the first half. Put them in a bind. And again, you're going into the half not knowing how to move the football. You got to figure things out. It didn't get much better, but they got put in a really tough position because of that first half. So listen, just one of the many things this team has to turn around and get focused on and change and improve on next year. They've got to come out and start scoring more points at a more efficient rate, not only in the first quarter, but in the entire first half. Way too much pressure on the defense and way too much pressure on themselves that they're putting on in the second half because they're not getting the job done in the first half. That's one of the many things I've got my eye on this offseason. How do they become a team who gets off to fast starts offensively, puts points up on the board, and they're not always having to fight their way back into games. Some games it's easier to do that than others, but they've got to get it together in the first half on the offensive side of the football. We'll see if Mike Bobo can get something together. A lot of people want him gone. That's another video for another time. I'm going to assume he's around calling plays in the fall until something happens. But he's got to get it together too as far as first half offensive coaching. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you over on Dawg Post. Thanks.